Inside his modest log home, a single lantern illuminated the small living space. Rustic furnishings lay scattered, a modest wooden table, a battered armchair by the hearth, and shelves lined with old books, relics of a past he rarely revisited. Carefully, he led her to the worn rug near the fireplace. She settled down with a low groan that might have been a growl of protest. Yet she did not resist him further. He knelt by her side. "Wait here," he said, voice hushed. Clutching bandages and antiseptics, he returned to tend her wounds, his mind reeling at the strangeness of the situation. Only half an hour ago, she had been fighting unspeakable beasts with savage grace, and now she lay on his floor, vulnerable, large amber eyes following his movements. Her chest rose and fell with labored breaths. Her flank was torn open, fur matted with blood. Though Nathan had some training in battlefield medicine, he had never treated a werewolf, much less one so mysterious. "It's going to hurt," he murmured. She offered no vocal response, but as he gently pressed the disinfectant against the wound, her lips curled, fangs flashing in a silent snarl. Yet, she did not snap at him. She endured, though trembling slightly. Delicately, he worked the antiseptic into the gashes, stopping the bleeding as best he could. He lathered antibiotic ointment along the ragged tear, carefully smoothing the bloodied fur away from the gash. Then he wrapped her torso with gauze, binding it snugly to hold the dressing in place. Through it all, the werewolf girl remained silent, occasionally twitching or flinching but never crying out in pain. When he finished, he let out a shaky sigh of relief. She was still breathing, albeit unsteadily, eyes heavy-lidded but watchful. The lantern light revealed intricate patterns along her fur, a mesmerizing swirl near her shoulders, and faint scars long healed evidence that this battle was far from her first. Something tugged at Nathan's memory, a fleeting sense of recognition, of having met eyes like hers before. But how could that be? And why did the sight of her evoke a melancholy warmth in his chest? Exhausted, he sank onto the floor beside her. "You'll be safe here," he whispered. She gazed at him, her fierce gaze softened slightly, as though uncertain. Then, with trembling limbs, she closed her eyes, letting exhaustion claim her. Nathan rose, fetching a blanket from a trunk by the wall. Normally, he would have offered it with a gentle word or a jest to ease tension. But words failed him now. Draping it over her, he felt a pang of tenderness he hadn't experienced in years, something protective stirring in his weary heart. If this remarkable creature had truly protected him all this time, he would repay the debt now. He would ensure her survival through the night. Outside, the moon shone cold and silent upon the corpses scattered near the tree line. The ghosts of battle lingered, yet Nathan felt a shift in the air, as if fate's hand had taken hold of his path. It made him uneasy. He was, by nature, a solitary man, unaccustomed to alliances or unexpected bonds. But perhaps some cords of destiny had wound themselves around him long ago, leading to this very moment. Beneath the glow of a harvest moon, he slipped into a restless doze, back propped against his meager couch, rifle never too far from reach. Images of those monstrous shapes haunted him, but also the white-furred guardian who lay wounded on his rug. A single notion whispered within his mind. If she had come to protect him for reasons unknown, then perhaps this entire landscape of fear and secret battles was far vaster than he had imagined. Nathan woke at dawn, stiff limbs protesting. Soft sunlight filtered through the cabin's small window, painting golden rays across the battered floor. His gaze flicked to the spot where the werewolf girl had lain. She was still there, curled like a watchful hound, though at some point during the night, she had shifted in her sleep. exposing fresh bloodstains on the bandages. Her breathing was shallower than before. Frowning, he rose to check on her. His pulse quickened. She felt feverish, her fur hot to the touch. Perhaps infection had already set in, or maybe her kind simply reacted differently to wounds. If he hoped to save her, he would need more resources. Medical supplies that were beyond his simple stash of leftover field kits. Resolved, Nathan decided to make the trek into the nearest town, a small, rustic settlement nearly 2 hours away by truck. He glanced back at the sleeping werewolf. What if she woke and fled? Still too weak to survive on her own. He could think of no better alternative, though. Her life could depend on immediate care. He quickly pulled on his coat, stuffing a wad of money and his keys into his pockets. Then he hesitated, uncertain how to reassure her if she woke in his absence. An idea stirred. He scribbled a note. "I'm going to get medicine. Don't leave. You'll die out there." He paused, uncertain if she could read, or if his note would mean anything to her. Nonetheless, he placed it near her head, hoping some part of her would sense his intention. With that, he gathered supplies, braced himself for the drive, and stepped out into the fresh morning air. The bodies of the slain beasts were gone. No trace of blood or claw marks on the ground, as though they had vanished in the night. A chill pricked the back of his neck. He had seen them slain, shot them himself. The memories were unmistakable. Why then did no evidence remain? Steeling himself, he climbed into his battered old truck and coaxed the engine to life. Gravel crunched under the tires as he headed down the winding forest road toward civilization. The morning sun revealed vistas of towering pines, rolling hills, and glimpses of distant mountains. Despite the beauty of the region, he rarely made this trip. Solitude had been his comfort, a refuge from the nightmares of his service years. But now, his mind was consumed with thoughts of the silent werewolf, her pained eyes, her shallow breathing. He willed the truck to move faster, ignoring the lumps in the rough road. At last, he reached the sleepy town nestled in a valley, a place of wooden storefronts and a single blinking traffic light. Few souls ventured out this early. He parked near the pharmacy, jogging inside with an urgency that caught the pharmacist's attention. Nathan, typically stoic and unshaven in a worn jacket, hurriedly asked for bandages, strong antibiotics, antiseptics, anything for a severe infection. The pharmacist, a kindly older man named Brett, raised an eyebrow but offered no questions beyond standard inquiries. Nathan paid, then loaded the supplies into a sack. As he was leaving, Brett cleared his throat. "Hope everything's okay." "Nathan," the man said, voice gentle. "Haven't seen you in weeks. You're not wounded, are you?" Nathan shook his head. "I'm fine," he replied, though his tone was stiff, as it always was when faced with small-town pleasantries. "I'm helping someone who's injured." Brett nodded, something like curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Well, if you need more, I'll be here." With that, Nathan left the pharmacy, and though part of him wanted to ask Brett about rumored wolf attacks or strange sightings in the region, he held his tongue, aware that he likely wouldn't get any credible answers. He started the old truck again, rumbling back onto the road. The trip seemed to drag, each minute stretching into uneasy hours. His mind conjured vivid images of the werewolf, writhing in feverish pain, alone in that cabin. What if she woke delirious and tore through his home, or bolted outside into broad daylight? What if she harmed herself trying to escape? As the forest engulfed him once more, these questions gnawed at his resolve. He pressed the accelerator, urging the truck faster than the winding road would allow. Dust billowed behind him, catching morning's light. By the time he arrived at the hidden turnoff to his property, midday sun slanted through the canopy. He didn't bother pulling up to the cabin's front side, choosing instead to park abruptly halfway up the drive. Throwing open the door, he scrambled out, nearly dropping the supply bag. The front door was ajar. Heart thudding, he rushed inside, half expecting to find the space torn apart, or, worse, empty. But to his relief, he found the werewolf girl still there, lying near the hearth. However, she had dragged herself closer to the wall, perhaps in some instinctual attempt at security. The note he had written lay torn on the floor, as if she had tried to pick it up or sniff it. She had not fled. Carefully, he knelt at her side. Her breathing came in shallow pants, eyes half-lidded but still open. In them, he saw not mere animal wariness but a soul, pained and uncertain, acknowledging that she was at his mercy. Without words, Nathan began to apply fresh disinfectant to the wound. She grunted a near sound that was the most expression he had heard from her. Her body trembled beneath his touch, though she allowed him to finish applying the salves and bandages. Despite her outward lupine features, he could sense the intelligence behind her eyes, a silent gratitude that transcended speech. He took a seat on the floor, leaning back against a wooden cupboard. The cabin felt too small, too quiet. "You're going to be okay," he said, not sure if she understood. "I've got enough medication for a few days. I hope that helps with whatever you are." She blinked slowly, the faint movement of her head giving the impression she was listening. With a sigh, he shifted his gaze. The day outside grew vibrant, yet the interior remained dim, shadowed. A gnawing curiosity set in. Who was she, truly? Why did she come every month, risking her life to protect him? A fleeting memory brushed against the edge of his mind, a childhood moment he had tried to bury. He recalled a camp outside the city, some charity event with animals, a young girl with startling eyes, rummaging for food behind a warehouse. But that had been so long ago, and that child had not borne fur. Yet something about the recollection made him wonder if perhaps the seeds of their connection had been planted many years prior. He shook away the thought. Surely it was only a coincidence. The mysteries were too vast to unravel in a single afternoon, he decided. Instead, to prepare a meal, though uncertain if she could stomach human fare, he boiled water, cooked a simple soup, and placed a portion in a bowl near her, waiting to see if hunger would entice her to attempt eating. She merely stared, half-dazed. Time crept on. He cleaned her wound again in the late afternoon, then fed her a few more pills carefully, placing them in a bit of liquid to help them down her throat. Each time, she managed to swallow. Little by little, the day ebbed. By dusk, she was sleeping more soundly, breath steadier, though her bandages were tinged with fresh streaks of blood. Nathan dozed off in his rocking chair, listening to the soothing crackle of the fire, haunted by dreams of battles that blurred memory and the surreal present. Over the next few days, her fever broke, and the werewolf girl's wound began to heal with startling speed. Each sunrise brought new signs of recovery, less shivering, deeper rests, even a cautious interest in the food he offered. Nathan kept a vigilant watch, stepping outside only for brief moments to gather water or stand guard on the porch. He dared not stray too far, mindful of the beasts that had attacked. Although he saw no further sign of them, their memory loomed. On the third day, he awoke to find her perched upright, leaning against the wooden wall, her gaze locked on him. The intensity of her eyes startled him, and for a moment, he froze, uncertain if fear or fascination held him so. She could certainly kill him if she chose, though he sensed that was not her intention. Tentatively, he approached. Her bandages were in need of changing. He set about the task with steady hands, feeling her muscles tense under his touch. When he peeled away the old dressing, he was astonished by the progress skin, Or was it hide, knitting together? Fur already beginning to regrow around the edges of the wound. Part of him wondered if all werewolves possessed regenerative qualities far beyond human norms. She watched him work, her expression inscrutable. Once finished, he sat back, exhaling. "You're healing well," he remarked. I don't know if you can understand me, but I'm grateful you've protected me all this time, and I'm glad you didn't die out there." She tilted her head, eyes flicking as though searching his face. Still, no words passed her lips. He had never heard her speak, not even a whisper, not even in the throes of pain. The silence lingered. Nathan considered, then said, "Do you have a name?" She merely blinked. A faint shift of her throat hinted at a struggle, as if wanting to respond. Yet some unknown barrier prevented her from forming words. Finally, she turned away, closing her eyes. "All right," he said softly, though a pang of disappointment touched him. "I'll call you Belle. For now." Belle means beautiful, or at least, it's something that doesn't sound too harsh. "If you hate it, I suppose you can growl or something." He attempted a small smile, feeling slightly ridiculous. She offered no reaction, though her ears twitched. Nathan sighed, pushing himself up to check the diminishing supplies of gauze and ointment. At this rate, she might be back on her feet in a day or two. But then what? Would she simply vanish again at the next full moon? Would he ever get answers? His mind teemed with questions. He found himself recollecting old rumors he had heard in the service whispers of clandestine genetic labs, dark experiments funded by rogue factions. But that all seemed too far-fetched. Then again, was it truly more unbelievable than the events playing out here? He had personally witnessed monstrous beasts and an otherworldly guardian. The frontier between science and legend felt dangerously thin in this remote wilderness. As daylight passed, Belle grew restless. Now that the worst of her pain had subsided, she attempted to stand on her hind legs, leaning heavily against the table for support. Nathan, caught off guard, rushed to her side to help. She allowed him to assist, though she grimaced with each movement. Step by step, they moved around the cabin, her muzzle occasionally parting in what might have been labored breathing. At one point, he realized how surreal it was, guiding a tall, silent werewolf across his living room floor, her claws scraping gently over the wooden boards, while beyond the windows lay a world unaware of her very existence. Despite the bizarre nature of it all, a fragile sense of companionship formed between them, as though united by shared necessity. Later that evening, they sat on opposite sides of the hearth. The flickering light danced across her white fur, casting playful shadows along the cabin walls. Nathan studied her intently, daring to speak into the hush. "You've been watching over me for nearly a year now, haven't you?" he asked quietly. "I never knew why, but thank you." She listened, head slightly lowered, eyes half closed in weariness. A soft exhale of breath left her muzzle, as if acknowledging his gratitude. Then, slowly, her paw lifted, pointing toward the old trunk in the corner. Nathan followed her gesture, eyebrows lifting in surprise. "That trunk?" he asked, glancing back at her. She nodded. It was the subtlest inclination of her head, but it was undeniably intentional. Intrigued, he rose and crossed the room, kneeling to open the trunk's ancient lid. Inside lay a clutter of mementos from his past life, an old service uniform. Medals he never displayed. Letters from a friend who had died in combat. At the bottom, stacked haphazardly, were more personal keepsakes, scrapbooks, photographs, a child's drawing or two. He took out a small photo album, flipping through the pages. Belle's ears perked up, her gaze sharpening on the images. They depicted him as a child with his father, fishing by a placid lake. Another showed a younger Nathan outside a local shelter, feeding stray animals with his mother. Then a third, a line of children in front of a small building. One of the children, a girl with pale hair and bright eyes, stood apart from the group, timid. Nathan stared at it. Something about that child unsettled him, a vague recollection of an incident long ago. He lifted his head to see Belle's reaction. Her ears were angled forward, her gaze riveted to the photograph as though transfixed by memory. Gently, she touched a claw to the photo, specifically the image of that young girl. A trembling urgency shone in her eyes. Nathan's heart thudded. "Is that you?" he asked, voice quavering. "That can't be. You were." "I?" His words faltered. Could the werewolf in front of him be that same child from his youth, now changed beyond recognition? It seemed impossible, yet her reaction said otherwise. Images from his childhood blurred in his mind, half-forgotten moments swirling like ghosts in a dream. Belle slowly lowered her paw. Her stare seemed to answer his question in the affirmative, though she did not speak. A flurry of emotions rose in Nathan's chest: confusion, sympathy, and an odd sense of familiarity. If she had once been human, how had she become this? Why had she sought him out in secret, guarding him? The silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Nathan shut the album and returned to his place by the fire. Gaze locked on the dancing flames, he spoke again, softly. "Belle, I think I remember you. You were at that shelter for orphans or runaways. I must have been 10 or 11 at the time. Mom used to bring me along whenever she volunteered. I recall you didn't speak much back then either." As if in agreement, Belle lowered her head. Her muzzle quivered slightly, perhaps in sorrow for a past too painful to recount. Nathan exhaled, pressing a hand against his forehead. "I can't believe I forgot," he murmured. "You disappeared one day, they said. They said you were taken away for some specialized treatment because of your strange condition. Then we moved to another state shortly after." Though she could not confirm it with words, he could sense the sorrow emanating from her, as though that period in her life was tied to experiments and horrors beyond a child's comprehension. It occurred to him that maybe she had come to him out of some bond forged in those days, or because he had shown her kindness once. "Why were you? What did they do to you?" he whispered. Tears threatened to well in his eyes, but he kept them in check. She offered no answer. Silence remained her only recourse. Eventually, he reached over and gingerly set a hand on her fur, above her paw. She flinched slightly, then allowed the contact. In that moment, a strange warmth coursed through Nathan, an overwhelming empathy for the lonely creature forced into a life of secrecy and war. "One swear," he said, voice quiet yet firm. "Whatever happened, I won't turn my back on you now. Maybe I can help you figure out who did this. Stop them, or at least protect you." Belle's golden eyes flicked toward his, reflecting the firelight. A silent gratitude, perhaps even hope, glowed there. In that fragile instant, they formed a pact, unspoken, united by shared past and present necessity. 2 more days passed, marked by Belle's slow but consistent recovery. With each sunrise, her strength grew, and by nightfall, she could stand firmly on 2 legs. Her fur, once bloodied and matted, regained a sleek radiance beneath the bandages. In the quiet hours, Nathan observed her, searching for some hint of personality beyond the stoic silence she carried. Once or twice, he caught her gazing at the sky through the small window, an expression of longing on her lupine features. During one of these nights, while the moon was a waning crescent, Belle startled him by walking across the living room, picking up a small notepad with trembling claws, and trying to scribble something. Fascinated, He came closer. A few lines formed, disjointed and barely legible, as if her hands or paws could not quite manage the shape of letters. Still, the effort spoke volumes. She was trying to communicate. Nathan gently guided her hand, helping her to steady the pen. But frustration soon had her letting out a faint hiss. Dropping the pen with a shake of her head, she lifted her clawed hands, flexing them as though the motion pained her. A sense of sorrow drifted between them. She had once been human, once able to write with ease. Now, she could not even manage a coherent script. Nathan placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said softly. "We'll figure this out in another way." She nodded, wordlessly grateful. Later that night, she paced the cabin, restless energy crackling around her. Even though her wound was not yet fully healed, Nathan could see the vigor in her strides, the alertness in the way she pricked her ears at every distant sound. Something beyond these walls seemed to call her, at times. She peered at the door, as though wanting to slip outside. But then she looked at Nathan with concern, her instincts telling her to stay. On the third night following her near-fatal battle, her instincts proved correct. Nathan was tending the cabin's small generator out, back when a faint whistle cut through the air. Not the sound of wind, but a mechanical drone, something advanced. Belle was at his side in an instant, alert and bristling. A moment later, a flash of red light danced across the trees, scanning. They both pressed themselves against the cabin's rough outer wall, hearts pounding. Nathan felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, reminiscent of covert ops back in the service. "Drones," he whispered through clenched teeth, even though no one could hear them. He had encountered such machines on the battlefield stealth surveillance units, or worse, armed drones used for clandestine hunts. Belle's lips peeled back in a silent snarl, hackles raised. Her eyes darted between Nathan and the tree line. It was as if she was urging him to get inside quickly, to avoid detection. The drone's red beam swept over the clearing, came close to the cabin door, then veered away toward the forest. Moments later, its buzzing hum grew distant, leaving only the chirp of nocturnal insects in its wake. Nathan drew a shaky breath. "This isn't a coincidence," he muttered, forcing his mind to remain calm. "Something, or someone, is searching for you, or maybe for me. But I suspect it's you." Belle's tense posture eased slightly, but her eyes glowed with apprehension. She confirmed his suspicion with a subtle nod. A sense of dread coiled in Nathan's gut. If a shadowy organization had created her or was responsible for her plight, they might also be behind the monstrous beasts. They could be combing the woods for her, wanting to reclaim their experiment. He had to plan carefully. They retreated inside, extinguishing the main lantern and drawing the curtains. Under the glow of a small flashlight, Nathan pulled out maps and a battered old laptop. He had limited internet connectivity here, just enough to occasionally check news or messages, but that was better than nothing. Belle watched curiously as he booted up the device, scanning for any unusual signals or chatter. His background in electronic warfare taught him how to look for certain digital footprints. Indeed, he found something. Faint, coded transmissions bouncing around local cell towers, reminiscent of scrambled data used by paramilitary outfits. The signals were short, intermittent, but definitely there. "They're coordinating," he said, voice grim. "They're operating close to here. This is bigger than just a random drone passing by." Belle inhaled sharply, an expression akin to fear crossing her wolfish features. Nathan glanced at her. "We can't stay here forever," he whispered. "They'll find you, and me. We need to figure out what we're dealing with, or at least find a safer hideout. I suspect I'm not the only reason you came to this area. If you've been fighting those beasts, Maybe they escaped from the same place that made you. She lowered her head, as though acknowledging the truth of his words. Then, carefully, she crouched by the trunk once more, rummaging inside. Eventually, she pulled out a small key Nathan had forgotten was there, a relic from an old safe deposit box he hadn't accessed in years. She held it up, studying its metallic glint under the flashlight. Nathan frowned. "What is that for?" "My father's old safe deposit box," he muttered, memory stirring. That box, located in a bank in a slightly larger city 3 hours from here, contained a few documents from his father's estate. He had never bothered to open it fully, the contents uninteresting at the time. "Why are you?" He paused, noticing the intensity of Belle's stare. Something in her eyes said she believed the key was important. Perhaps she knew more about his father's secrets than he did. His father had been a researcher, dabbling in government contracts, rumored to have worked on advanced genetics programs. Nathan had never dug deeply into those files after the old man died. The father-son relationship had been distant at best, overshadowed by paternal obsession and a broken home. But now, puzzle pieces rearranged in his mind. Could it be that his father, or the company he worked for, had a hand in the creation of Belle and the monstrosities that plagued the forest? A chill swept through Nathan, a realization that the seeds of this mystery were rooted in his own bloodline. Carefully, he retrieved the key from Belle. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll go. We'll see what's in that box. But we have to be careful. If they're searching for us, we can't drive out in the open during the day. We'll slip out at dawn, take the lesser-known roads. Hopefully, we can lose any drones or watchers." Belle nodded, though she still bore the shape of a creature half beast, half human. Her eyes shone with renewed purpose. A current of destiny wound between them, forging an alliance no words could sever. They would face the unknown together, human soldier and silent werewolf. When the first rays of sun lanced through the pines, Nathan and Belle emerged from the cabin. A chill wind ruffled the lingering night's shadows, carrying the scent of damp foliage. They had packed a few essentials: medical supplies, weapons, the laptop, some clothes and food. Belle donned an oversized coat with a hood that Nathan hoped might disguise her somewhat if she hunched down in the passenger seat, though her bestial features were impossible to fully conceal, perhaps from a distance, in a quickly passing vehicle. She might pass as a tall figure with unusual hair. He guided her into the truck, glancing around for any sign of watchers or drones. The forest seemed still, but tension coiled in his gut. He started the engine, wincing as the old motor coughed to life. Pressing the gas gently, he eased onto the dirt path. As they wound away from the cabin, a pang of regret tugged at him. This place had been his refuge for years. Now, it might forever be compromised. They took a back road leading north, a narrow lane seldom used. Belle kept her head low, occasionally peering through the windows. Morning mist hovered over the treetops, and the sun glowed orange through the haze. Nathan kept the radio off, ears straining for the hum of a drone or the roar of pursuit. Yet, the journey remained eerily quiet. In under an hour, they emerged onto a cracked highway that stretched toward the city. Traffic was light, mostly lumber trucks or old sedans. Nathan guided the truck with calm precision, though his heart hammered. If a patrolling unit recognized Belle, they could be pinned down on the open road. Belle, for her part, remained still, posture tense, prepared to spring into action at the slightest threat. At midday, they stopped at an abandoned rest stop. The windows boarded, graffiti covering the walls. Nathan killed the engine, slipping out to stretch his legs. Belle followed, sniffing the air warily. A tangle of emotions coursed through him, concern for her, curiosity about his father's involvement in all this, and dread of the confrontation that might lie ahead. He offered Belle some water, which she lapped from a bottle with careful sips. "Not much farther," he said softly, scanning the horizon. "We'll reach the bank in another hour. Then we'll see what's in that deposit box." Belle tipped her head, as though to say she understood. Nathan studied her face, noticing how even though she appeared more wolf than woman, the shape of her eyes and slight movements in her ears betrayed profound intelligence. If only she could speak. He rummaged in the truck bed for an old hat, which he gently placed over her ears, though it fit awkwardly. A faint rumble in her chest hinted at mild amusement or acceptance. He chuckled dryly. "If we get pulled over, let me do the talking." "All right." They resumed their journey, the highway unraveling through rolling fields, then winding into the outskirts of a larger town. Nathan felt Belle tense at the sight of more vehicles, a few passers-by on the sidewalks. She slumped in her seat, hood drawn, cap pulled low. No one gave their battered truck more than a passing glance, at least from what Nathan could tell. A cluster of medium-rise buildings signaled they were nearing the city center. He spotted the bank, a modest, older structure of white stone columns and tinted windows. Parked along the curb, he turned to Belle, exhaling shakily. "I'll go in alone. Better you stay here, out of sight." "I'll try to be quick," she nodded, though a flicker of anxiety flashed in her gaze. He understood the risk of separation, of watchers or drones. Still, they had no choice. "I'll lock the doors," he said. "Hide if you have to. I won't be long." Stepping onto the sidewalk, he pocketed the deposit box key, scanning for anything suspicious. Nothing stood out, just a smattering of pedestrians and a security guard near the bank's entrance. Inside, it was quiet, the polished floors reflecting fluorescent lights. A tired-looking clerk at the desk offered a polite smile. "Hello, welcome," the clerk greeted. "How can we help you today?" Nathan forced a friendly nod. "I'm here to access a safe deposit box," he said, handing over the key and some ID. The clerk motioned for him to sign a ledger, then guided him to a secure room lined with small metal drawers. Once alone, Nathan's hands trembled slightly as he inserted the key into the correct box. The lock clicked. He removed the metal container and placed it on the table, lifting the lid. Inside were carefully arranged folders, some official documents from his father's estate, a few old family photos, and a sealed envelope labeled with a cryptic set of numbers and the word Capella. Beneath that, a thumb drive, taped to a thick file. Heart pounding. Nathan recognized the name of the clandestine project his father had once mentioned, Project Capella. He stuffed the folders, envelope, and drive into his bag, quickly scanning them for anything obviously time-sensitive. A line in the file's margin caught his eye. Subject #even, hybrid, field testing, adaptive genome. Alarm shot through him. That might refer to Belle. He forced himself not to linger. With a cautious glance around, he locked the empty container, returned it to the vault, and headed back into the main lobby. The clerk was too busy tapping away at a computer to pay him much attention. Nathan slipped out to the street, tension coiled in his muscles. The sunlight felt harsh and exposing after the dim interior. He made a beeline for the truck. Belle was nowhere in sight until he circled to the passenger door and saw her huddled on the floorboard, concealed from prying eyes. Relief coursed through him. He slid behind the wheel. "Got it," he said. Voice hushed. Belle perked up, ears brushing against the hat. "Now let's get somewhere safe to read this." He started the engine, but in that exact moment, a black SUV pulled up behind them. 4 men in dark suits emerged, scanning the sidewalk with suspicious precision. Nathan's gut twisted. These men reeked of corporate or governmental authority, not local police. He ducked lower, pulling away from the curb as casually as he could manage. Heart hammering, he maneuvered through traffic, half expecting the SUV to follow. But after a few blocks, he saw no sign of pursuit. Still, the men's sudden arrival set his nerves on edge. They had the look of watchers, fixers, the kind who handled dirty business. He drove out of the city center, eventually finding a cheap motel with a parking lot that offered some privacy. Shifting the truck into park, he turned to Belle. "We'll check in here, just for a bit. I need to see what's on these papers in that drive." Belle nodded, gaze flicking around warily. With quick reflexes, she pulled the hat down lower, muzzle hidden by the hood, and they exited the vehicle. Nathan approached the office, paying cash for a room at the end of the lot. The bored clerk didn't spare them a second glance, sliding a key across the counter. The room was cramped, its walls yellowed from cigarette smoke, the sheets on the bed a dull floral pattern. The drapes were thick, which was a small mercy. Nathan shut the door, locked it, then flipped on a single lamp. Belle removed the hat and coat, sighing silently. At once, she began pacing, her ears trained on the door, as if expecting an ambush. Nathan settled at the small table, pulling out the folder. The top page read, "Project Capella Classified. Level 7 Clearance Required Overview." The Capella Initiative's objective is to engineer advanced hybrids for potential use in infiltration, reconnaissance, and specialized combat roles. Subjects combine human and lupine DNA, augmented with growth accelerants, providing them with heightened senses, physical regeneration, and a humanoid form capable of speech. Nathan's lips parted in shock. He skimmed onward, discovering references to subject #even, highly unstable transformations, potential for extraordinary loyalty if psychologically imprinted, and extreme aggression if threatened. Another line, acquisition of suitable test subjects has been conducted through various channels, including orphan programs, juvenile detention facilities, and undisclosed adoption agencies. Nathan's stomach churned. They had preyed on vulnerable children. He read further, eyes wide. Project Capella had faced numerous ethical and safety violations, ultimately leading to a covert shutdown. The documents alleged some subjects escaped before the facility was permanently closed, and a number of more vicious prototypes had broken free as well, giving rise to rumored sightings of monstrous wolf-like entities. The final page of the folder mentioned Dr. Carlisle Bishop, a lead researcher with direct ties to the project. Nathan felt fury coil in his blood. Dr. Bishop was one of his father's associates. Then a name that chilled him, Nathan Silver's associate contacts next of kin. It seemed the project had kept tabs on him as well. His father must have known, must have been part of it all, at least in some capacity. Belle watched him from across the room, her golden eyes filled with unspoken pain. He could see it now. She had once been that timid child with pale hair. And now, she was a creature forever changed by twisted experimentation. Nathan's hands shook as he opened the sealed envelope. A typed letter addressed to him from his father fell. "Out, son. If you are reading this, it means the time has come for you to know the truth. Project Capella was not an endeavor I supported willingly, but financial strains forced my cooperation. I am ashamed of my part. Your mother never knew. The Eason subject is special. She was different from the rest, retaining more humanity, less aggression. I tried to protect her, but I failed. If by some chance she survived, you must help her. The people behind Capella are relentless. They won't rest until they reclaim their property. Be wary of Dr. Bishop. Remember what I taught you, trust your instincts and do not abandon her. Tears stung Nathan's eyes. He clenched his jaw, forcing composure. Belle approached, nostrils flaring at the letter as though she sensed the ghosts of those words. He raised his gaze to her, voice quiet but resonant with determination. You were even, the one my father tried to protect. They turned you into this. I'm so sorry. Her clawed hand rested on his shoulder, a gesture of gratitude and sadness combined. They were in this together now, bound by a chain of guilt and redemption that spanned the years. Finally, Nathan placed the letter aside. One question remained: how to proceed. The final item was the thumb drive taped to the folder. Nathan borrowed a battered laptop from the bag and plugged it in. The screen flickered with encrypted files, which he managed to decrypt using knowledge gleaned in the military. The data included addresses, hidden labs, details about prototype splicing. At the bottom, a single text file labeled Sanctum read, "If even or other subjects remain at large, confirm safe haven at Redwood facility. Bishop will attempt reacquisition. Destroy Redwood if compromised." Nathan stared at the lines, mind racing. Redwood facility, possibly the site of further data, or a place of refuge for the escaped hybrids. But the note suggested that, if it was compromised, the project's architects would wipe it out, along with any survivors. Belle peered at him inquiringly, and he told her what the file said. She paced, exhaling softly. Nathan realized that Redwood might be her next destination, if only to find answers or rescue others. Yet it could also be a trap. He shut the laptop, setting it aside. Tension hung in the air as they weighed their options. Finally, Nathan spoke. "It seems we have two choices," he said quietly. "We either vanish, run forever, or we go to Redwood and face this. If you have allies there, or if there are other captives, we might be able to help them shut down whatever's left of Capella for good. Otherwise, these men will keep hunting us." Belle stopped pacing, turning to face him fully. Her expression was grim but resolute. There was no doubt in Nathan's mind she would not run. She wanted an end to this nightmare, not just for herself, but for anyone else trapped in that hell. Steeling himself, he nodded. "Then we'll go," he affirmed. Though no words passed Belle's lips, her eyes spoke volumes. A silent vow was made. Tomorrow, they would drive deeper into the unknown, risking everything for the chance at freedom and truth. Meanwhile, outside the dingy motel window, the world carried on, ignorant of the powerful secrets trembling just beyond the veil. Dawn broke over the parking lot, painting the cracked asphalt in faint gold. Nathan rubbed sleep from his eyes, weary but determined. Belle stood by the window, watching passers-by shuffle to their cars. She was dressed in a loose sweatshirt and pants, her hood pulled over her ears, though her tail made a faint lump at the back. They slipped out of the motel without drawing attention. The Redwood facility's coordinates were stored in the laptop, an area several hours north, near the mountain ranges. Nathan knew that territory was rugged, home to thick forests and old logging roads, ideal for a clandestine lab, or at least an abandoned one. They drove through twisting highways and narrow back roads. As the hours stretched, the forest thickened, evergreens rising like silent sentinels. The air grew crisp, and patches of snow lingered on higher slopes. Occasionally, Belle would cast a sharp glance out the windows, as though sensing watchers. Yet they saw no sign of drones or black SUVs. By mid-afternoon, they neared a gated dirt road marked with rusted no trespassing signs. A battered chain blocked the way. Beyond, a faint track disappeared into the trees. This had to be the path to Redwood. Nathan parked and cut the engine. The hush of the forest enveloped them, broken only by birdsong. Belle hopped out, sniffing the wind, her hackles pricked in caution. Nathan hefted his rifle, took a breath, and approached the gate. They could have tried forcing the truck through, but the path looked narrow, overgrown. Better to proceed on foot. He cut the chain with bolt cutters he'd brought, pushing the gate open enough for them to squeeze through. Once on the other side, they trudged along the overgrown path, the forest crowding in from both sides. Fallen branches snapped underfoot, and thick underbrush tugged at their clothes. After a mile or so, the path opened into a large clearing. At the center stood a dilapidated facility, partially camouflaged by tall pines. A perimeter fence encircled the compound, topped with rusted barbed wire. A sign read Redwood Biotechnical Station, though the letters were faded. The entire place looked abandoned, windows boarded, walls streaked with mold. Belle paused, ears swiveling. She caught some faint sound, or perhaps a scent, that made her tense. Nathan raised his rifle, scanning the perimeter. All seemed still. The front gate to the compound was ajar, squeaking softly in the breeze. They slipped through, stepping onto the crumbling pavement. The facility's main building loomed, a stark reminder of the secrets once harbored here. Inside, the corridors lay shrouded in dust and shadow. Broken lights hung from the ceiling. Occasional footprints in the dust suggested that not all visitors were from the distant past. They proceeded carefully, Belle leading with silent grace, muzzle lifted to detect any presence. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest, each echo of their footsteps magnified by a tension that crackled in the stale air. They passed a row of doors, each labeled with cryptic terms like genetic lab, testing wing, containment. The place reeked of chemicals and sorrow. Belle slowed near a heavy door marked Research Archive, sniffing intently. She scratched at the door, glancing at Nathan as though urging him to open it. He tested the handle locked. He rummaged through his pack, producing a small pry bar. After some effort, the lock gave way with a metallic screech. Inside, old filing cabinets lined the walls, many drawers pulled out or dumped in haste, eager to find anything that could help them understand the project's final days. They sifted through the remnants. Dust swirled in the beam of Nathan's flashlight. One cabinet remained locked. With a swift motion, Nathan pried it open, revealing a scattering of folders labeled E8, E2, E3. 8A chill prickled his neck. He pulled out Even 7's folder and flipped through the pages. Though incomplete, it detailed the final results of Belle's transformation, accelerated healing, partial speech capabilities, advanced muscle density. Then a note, Even demonstrates unusual empathy, moral reasoning intact, high potential for bonding, recommended for immediate disposal or reconditioning. Nathan swallowed hard, so they had recognized Belle's unique nature and deemed it a threat. He glanced at Belle, who looked away, ears drooping. That moment of heartbreak underscored how cruelly she had been treated. He set the folder aside. Next, they found references to other subjects, E1, E2, E3. Some died. Others exhibited uncontrollable aggression, presumably becoming the monstrous beasts that roamed the night. Nathan realized these were the same creatures that attacked Belle near his cabin. Failed experiments turned feral. Another page named a potential backer, an organization called Paragon Defense Solutions. A scribbled note read, "Keep Redwood operational as fallback in case primary lab's compromised." Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from somewhere in the facility. Belle's ears twitched. She dropped into a defensive crouch, lips curling silently. Nathan snapped his head toward the door. Someone else was here. He drew his rifle, flicking off the safety. In the corridor, they heard footsteps heavy. methodical, thought accompanied by the faint hum of electronics. Belle's muzzle wrinkled in a soundless growl. A silhouette moved past the broken window in the door. Nathan's eyes widened a figure in tactical gear, face obscured by a helmet, carrying a rifle with advanced attachments. This was no random scavenger. They crouched behind a row of cabinets, hearts hammering. Another figure joined the first. Muted voices spoke in clipped tones, though the words were unclear. Nathan's mind raced likely a paramilitary team sent by Paragon or Dr. Bishop to reclaim data or destroy evidence. As the footsteps drew near, Nathan signaled Belle with a slight nod. Their plan was unspoken. Wait for an opening. Fight if cornered. Sure enough, the door to the archive creaked open. A beam of flashlight cut across the dust, scanning the gloom. Silence stretched. Then a man's voice, low and tense. Looks like the files are compromised. We're too late. Let's keep moving, have to check the containment wing. They left. Footsteps receding. Nathan exhaled. Relief mingling with renewed apprehension. They weren't alone here, and a confrontation seemed inevitable. He gathered the Eason file and stuffed it in his pack, exchanging a look with Belle. This place wasn't safe. Quietly, they followed the corridor in the opposite direction of the paramilitary team, slipping deeper into the heart of Redwood. At times, they passed empty cells with observation windows, haunting reminders of captive test subjects. The air felt heavier, as though the ghosts of tortured children and experiments lingered. Belle breathed rapidly, her distress palpable. Finally, they reached a large steel door labeled, "Containment Authorized Personnel Only." Belle halted, her eyes scanning the edges. Faint scuff marks indicated recent passage. Nathan pressed his ear to the door, hearing hushed voices within. "This is it," he murmured. "They might be planning to purge the facility, or who knows." Before they could decide on the next move, the door suddenly swung open from the inside. A startled guard came face to face with Nathan. Time slowed. Shock registered in the man's eyes. He raised his rifle, but Belle was faster. She lunged with fluid grace, knocking the weapon aside. The man let out a strangled cry. Another figure behind him shouted, opening fire. Nathan dove aside, bullets ricocheting off the metal walls. Belle rolled behind cover, silent and deadly. Nathan returned fire, aiming carefully. His bullet found its mark, downing one soldier. Another unleashed a barrage. Belle slipped around the corner, pouncing onto him with savage elegance. Her claws raked the man's armor. Nathan cringed as the soldier let out a gargled scream, quickly silenced. Then a fresh wave of footsteps thundered from deeper within the containment wing. They were pinned, outnumbered. Nathan barked to Belle. "We have to move!" She nodded. They dashed through the door, weaving among crates and old equipment. Shouts echoed behind them as more armed men sprinted into view. Gunfire flashed, bullets whizzing overhead. Nathan took cover behind a steel console. Belle crouched beside him. He peeked out, spotting at least 6 heavily armed operatives. Gritting his teeth, he aimed and fired, picking off one soldier. Belle charged another, evading bullets with preternatural reflexes. Her silent fury was terrifying, as though a lifetime of captivity had honed her to lethal perfection. Nathan fired again, hitting another attacker. Despite their skill, the enemy pressed in relentlessly. They wore advanced body armor, numbers on their side. A bullet tore into Nathan's shoulder, spinning him. Pain flared, hot and blinding. Belle whirled in fury, launching herself at the shooter. But the damage was done. Nathan sank to his knees, gasping. He forced himself to keep his rifle steady, heart pounding. Behind them, a set of reinforced doors marked emergency exit. If they made a stand, they would likely be overrun. With a grunt, Nathan forced himself upright, ignoring the burning in his shoulder. He called out to Belle, gesturing toward the exit. She understood immediately, batting away an incoming soldier with a swipe that sent him crashing into a console. They sprinted for the doors. A final hail of bullets rattled the walls, sparks showering. Nathan kicked the bar, forcing the exit open. Daylight streamed in, nearly blinding them after the facility's gloom. They stumbled into an overgrown courtyard, large pine trees looming overhead. The paramilitaries roared in pursuit, but Belle slammed the heavy door behind them, jamming it with a metal rod. "Go! Go!" Nathan hissed, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Belle half supported him, guiding him toward the fence line. They scaled the sagging chain link, dropping onto the other side. Shots rang out from an upper window, but missed. Together, they fled into the tree line, hearts thundering, refusing to slow until the redwood compound lay well behind them. At last, they sank to the ground under the shelter of dense firs. Nathan's head swam, pain radiating through his arm. Belle quickly tore strips from her hoodie, binding his wound. He clenched his teeth, sweat trickling down his brow. The bandage would stanch the bleeding for now, but he needed better care soon. His thoughts reeled with everything they had learned. The paramilitary presence, the absolute confirmation that a conspiracy sought to reclaim or destroy all evidence of Capella. Belle's eyes shone with concern as she carefully checked the bandage, ensuring no further bleeding. She spared a glance behind them, as though certain more hunters would be on their trail soon. We have what we need," Nathan rasped, patting his pack, proof of what they did. "Who's behind it? But we need help, someone who can blow this wide open. Otherwise, we'll never be free." Belle nodded silently, determination in her gaze. The next move would be to find allies, or at least a platform to expose Paragon Defense Solutions and the remnants of Capella. But who would believe them? Nathan's old military contacts might, if they were still alive or trustworthy. The alternative was to vanish, bury the evidence, hope no one found them. But neither Belle nor Nathan seemed willing to turn their backs on the remaining captives or on the memory of what had been done here. As they regrouped in the twilight of the forest, the wind sighed through the branches, an elegy for the ghosts that still lingered in Redwood. Their footsteps had barely faded, yet the real battle was just beginning. They pressed on through the thick woodland until dusk, searching for a temporary shelter where Nathan could rest and they could plan their next move. At last, they discovered an abandoned ranger's cabin, partly collapsed but still offering 4 walls and a roof. With caution, they slipped inside. The space reeked of rotting leaves and animal nests, yet it provided a small haven. Belle helped Nathan sit against the wall, quickly gathering some kindling to start a small fire in the dilapidated fireplace. She pressed a clawed hand to his forehead, checking for fever. He grimaced. "I'll manage," he assured her, though the wound throbbed mercilessly. From his pack, he took out some antibiotic pills and painkillers, swallowing them dry. Belle crouched close, golden eyes filled with concern. Nathan offered a small smile. "I'm all right," he murmured, though that was only half true. "We should figure out who to contact. I know one man from my old unit. Might be able to trust him." He rummaged for his phone, cursing softly at the lack of signal. The Redwood region was notoriously remote, and they had left the roads far behind. Belle's ears perked, scanning the night. She seemed restless, uneasy in the presence of so much danger looming beyond the trees. At length, she sat down beside Nathan, the warmth of her fur brushing his shoulder, a silent comfort. Under the flicker of the fire, Nathan retrieved the laptop once more, Going through the data on Project Capella. If I can get this into the hands of someone who'll do the right thing, someone not on Paragon's payroll, then we can expose them. The key is where and how. Bell nodded, tapping a claw on the redwood notes. The mention of Dr. Bishop loomed large, an ominous threat. If Redwood was compromised, there might be other facilities. More children or test subjects could be suffering, just as Bell had. Nathan's jaw tightened. He refused to abandon them. Eventually, he dozed off despite the pain. Bell kept watch, silent as a sentinel. The hours slipped by until the faint glow of dawn crept through the boarded windows. When Nathan stirred, he found Belle perched by the open doorway, gazing at the rising sun. Her ears flattened a bit as he approached, but she appeared calmer. "We can't stay long," he said softly, testing his bandaged shoulder. The pain had dulled slightly, thanks to the medication. "We need to find a secure place to contact my old friend, Wilson. If he's still with the military, he might help, or at least direct me to the right people. We'll have to move carefully, though." Belle rose gracefully, nodding. They shouldered their packs, slipping out into the forest once more. It took them half the morning to find a rural road that led south toward the nearest small town. Thankfully, they encountered no sign of the paramilitary team. Perhaps the soldiers were still combing Redwood or had pulled back to regroup, but it would be foolish to think themselves safe. As they trudged, the air grew warmer, the forest less dense. By midday, they reached a rundown roadside diner, where an elderly couple ate lunch by a window. Nathan's plan was to use a payphone or public phone line. With Belle hidden just out of sight among some bushes, he crept in, ignoring curious stares from the few patrons. The old payphone near the restrooms thankfully still worked. With shaky fingers, he dialed a series of numbers, hoping Wilson had not changed his contact since the last time they spoke. Nearly a year ago, after several rings, a familiar gruff voice answered. Wilson speaking. Nathan's pulse pounded. "It's me," he murmured. I need help. Life or death. Hush, hush. Are you still at the base?" There was a pause. "Nathan, you vanish for months and call me from a payphone in the middle of who knows where. This better be good. Trust me, it is. I've stumbled onto something big, corrupt, possibly high level. I need a secure place to meet somewhere off the grid. Can you do that?" Wilson sighed heavily. "I can arrange something. The old orchard near Kingston, you remember. North side, behind the silo. Meet me there in 2 days. I'll bring a SAT uplink. See if we can move some data around. But you'd better watch your tail, buddy. If this is half as serious as you sound, you're in deep." Nathan closed his eyes in relief. "Thank you," he whispered, then ended the call. He tossed a couple of crumpled bills on the diner counter. For a coffee, he didn't bother to drink, ignoring the waitress's questioning look, and hurried out. Bell waited behind the diner, hood pulled low. He recounted what Wilson had said. "We have 2 days," he concluded. "That orchard is maybe 4 hours from here, by car. We'll slip in quietly, meet him, and see if we can transmit the data. With luck, we'll get the truth out to someone who can blow the whistle on Paragon." Belle nodded, a faint glimmer of hope in her eyes. Yet a prickle of anxiety clung to them both. 2 days was plenty of time for the hunters to close in. They managed to hitch a ride from a passing farmer, willing to take them partway. Nathan introduced Belle as a friend injured in a fire, hence the bandages and odd posture. The farmer asked no further questions, seemingly content to pass the time with small talk about the weather and harvest. This partial ride helped them cross miles of countryside, dropping them off near another small junction. From there, they walked a dusty back road. That evening, they sheltered in a hidden grove, sleeping in shifts, Belle insisted on taking the lion's share of watch duty, while Nathan's shoulder wound forced him to rest. As he dozed, he dreamt of Capella Labs, monstrous shapes prowling a red-lit corridor. Belle trapped behind a glass wall, reaching out to him in silent plea. He awoke drenched in sweat, heart hammering. Belle immediately placed a reassuring hand on his good shoulder, her gaze calm but sympathetic. Sunrise found them trudging onward, grateful that they encountered no suspicious vehicles or drones overhead. Perhaps Paragon's net was cast elsewhere, or perhaps they were being lulled into a false sense of security. 2 days later, they arrived at the orchard near Kingston as planned. Tall apple trees stretched over gentle hills, their blossoms drifting in a light breeze. At the orchard's northern boundary, an old silo towered above the landscape. It was a relic from a bygone era, paint flaking, roof sagging. Wilson was there, standing by a battered SUV with tinted windows, arms folded across his broad chest. He looked much as Nathan remembered Stocky, with a steely gaze honed by years of service. When he spotted Nathan and Belle approaching from the tree line, he raised an eyebrow, flicking the safety on a sidearm at his hip. "Nathan," he greeted curtly. Nathan nodded, wincing slightly at his still sore shoulder. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I know it's a lot to ask." Wilson's gaze flicked to Belle, analyzing her hunched posture, the hood partially obscuring her lupine features. He said nothing for a tense moment, then simply shook his head. "You weren't kidding," he muttered. "What the hell did you stumble into?" Nathan explained, voice hushed yet urgent, about the Capella project, Redwood, the paramilitary forces, and the evidence they'd gathered. Wilson listened with grim concentration, occasionally glancing at Belle, who stood silently by Nathan's side, her expression unreadable. When Nathan finished, Wilson cursed softly, running a hand through his cropped hair. "Damn, that's heavy. If half of what you're saying is true, we're dealing with some serious black ops." I tapped a few contacts on my way here. They say there's chatter about unusual private security deployments in the region. "Could be your friends from Redwood," Nathan exhaled. "We need to upload the evidence, somewhere safe, like a server out of Paragon's reach. Then we can contact someone high up who isn't corrupted. Maybe the press if all else fails." Wilson nodded. Stepping to the back of his SUV, he swung open the trunk to reveal a portable satellite uplink, along with a rugged laptop. "Let's do it. I've got a secured channel. We can send everything to a friend in Army Intel who owes me a favor. If you'd rather contact the press, that's an option too, but they might be easily silenced or compromised. Let's start with official channels." Nathan and Belle exchanged glances. Nathan nodded. "Sounds good." They huddled around the SUV, hooking the laptop to the sat link. A small dish angled skyward. The orchard was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves. Belle stood watch, scanning the perimeter, ears perked for any sign of intrusion. Meanwhile, Nathan plugged in his own laptop, transferring the Capella files to Wilson's system. Lines of data scrolled across the screen, evidence of genetic horrors, captive children, corporate conspiracies. Wilson's friend responded promptly, albeit with confusion and alarm. "Where the hell did you get these?" came a cryptic text. Wilson typed back quick explanations, urging caution and anonymity. The data began uploading to a secure server. Nathan held his breath, relief and dread mixing. If they succeeded in widely disseminating this, Paragon's secrecy would be shattered. But at what cost? Suddenly, Belle stiffened, a low, barely audible growl rumbling in her throat. Nathan's head snapped up, adrenaline surging. "What is it?" She pointed to a glint of metal among the distant apple trees. Instantly, Wilson cursed. "We've got company," he said, reaching for a rifle in the trunk. Within seconds, multiple dark-suited figures spread through the orchard. Gunshots rang out, bullets shredding the air. Bell shoved Nathan behind the SUV, crouching low. Wilson returned fire with practiced efficiency, but they were outnumbered at least 3-1. Muzzle flashes flickered among the rows of trees. Nathan hastily ducked into the driver's side, pulling the SUV door open for cover. "Keep them off us while the upload finishes," he yelled, voice trembling from pain and adrenaline. Bell nodded, bounding around the vehicle, moving so swiftly that the gunman scarcely tracked her. In a flurry of movement, she tackled one, disarming him with a savage wrench of her claws. Wilson loosed controlled bursts of fire, taking down 2 attackers. Yet more advanced troopers pushed in from the flank, peppering the SUV with rounds. The orchard erupted into chaos, splintered wood, flying dirt, the acrid smell of gunpowder. Nathan kept his head low, eyes flicking to the laptop screen. The upload bar crawled at a maddening pace. 78%, 79%. Another bullet ricocheted off the hood, cracking the windshield. He gritted his teeth, praying the equipment would hold. Bell wove between the apple trees, drawing some of the assailants away. Her agility was unmatched, her silent approach unnerving them. They shouted orders, trying to pin her down. She pounced from behind a trunk, claws raking, fangs bared, incapacitating another foe. Yet there seemed to be no end to them, dark shapes slipping from behind orchard rows, well coordinated, determined to end the threat. At 94%, a flashbang erupted near the SUV, stunning Wilson momentarily. He staggered, ears ringing. Nathan shielded his face, blinking away disorientation. A pair of gunmen rushed in, seizing the opportunity to close the distance. Bell spotted them too late. One yanked open the SUV door, aiming at the laptop. Nathan lunged, grappling with him, desperate to protect the data. The soldier's elbow smashed into Nathan's wounded shoulder, sending agony ripping through him. He cried out, stumbling. Bell let out a soundless snarl, launching herself onto the soldier. They toppled to the ground, rolling. Another soldier raised a weapon, about to fire at Bell. Wilson, half blind from the flashbang, mustered a shot that struck the attacker, dropping him instantly. The orchard echoed with the brutality of close combat. The upload reached 100%. Nathan, reeling from pain, slammed the enter key to finalize the transfer. A green confirmation flashed across the screen. He roared to Wilson, "It's done! We need to get out of here." Bell flung aside the soldier she'd been fighting, blood flecking her fur. Wilson stumbled to the SAT uplink, ripping cables free to ensure no one else could tamper. Another hail of bullets spattered the SUV. The engine hissed, fluid pouring from a puncture. They wouldn't be driving out in this. "On foot!" Wilson bellowed, grabbing his gear. Nathan clutched the laptop. Bell tore off her hoodie, no longer concerned with concealment. Her white fur spattered in grime and sweat. They dashed into the orchard rows, weaving between trees. The paramilitaries pursued, gunfire snapping branches overhead, panting, hearts pounding. They fought to gain ground. Bell took point, clearing a path with terrifying ferocity whenever an attacker blocked their way. Wilson and Nathan followed, returning fire as best they could. Soon, the orchard gave way to open fields. Their enemies held back momentarily, perhaps wary of losing cover. A lull in the firing gave the trio a precious few moments to sprint across the tall grass. Nathan's shoulder burned, each step a knife of agony. Wilson was limping, a graze to his legs slowing him. They reached a shallow depression by an irrigation ditch, collapsing behind the embankment to catch their breath. Bell scanned behind them, chest heaving, muzzle stained with the memory of battle. In the distance, the orchard remained silent, as though the gunmen had chosen not to chase them further. Maybe they feared an ambush, or maybe they'd realized the data was already gone. For now, the three survivors were safe. Wilson let out a ragged laugh that bordered on hysterical relief. "You sure know how to pick a fight," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Nathan only groaned, leaning heavily against the embankment. Belle knelt by him, gently examining his shoulder. The fresh trauma had reopened the wound, staining the bandages red. "You're lucky, brother," Wilson muttered, shaking his head. "That could have been a kill shot." Nathan grimaced. "We're all lucky." Then, more seriously, "The data's out. They can't stop it now." The realization settled over him somewhere, on a secure server. The truth about Project Capella waited to be analyzed by at least one honest official. A wave of exhaustion and relief threatened to overwhelm him. Belle touched his uninjured arm, golden eyes reflecting quiet determination. Nathan gave her a weak smile. "Thank you," he murmured. She nodded, though her gaze flicked to the orchard with lingering tension. They all understood that, while they had succeeded in exposing Capella's secrets, they were far from out of danger. Paragon would be enraged, more determined than ever to silence them. Wilson rubbed his jaw. "We need to vanish for a bit, until the feds or the army can follow up on that data. Once it's public, Paragon's going down. But these things take time." Nathan nodded wearily. "We'll find a place off the grid. My cabin might be compromised. Maybe your safe house, or somewhere else entirely." Wilson agreed. A heavy hush hung over them as they plotted the next steps. Above, the sky was wide and uncaring, the sun drifting west. In that moment, the three shared an unspoken bond of camaraderie, forged in the crucible of life or death struggle. Belle's muzzle rose slightly, eyes scanning the open horizon. For the first time since Nathan had known her, there seemed to be a spark of hope shining in her lupine features. They trudged along the irrigation ditch, eventually locating a gravel road that Wilson said led to a seldom-used hunting cabin owned by a friend of his. It was risky to assume no one would be watching, but with the orchard compromised, their options were few. Belle supported Nathan, who was pale from blood loss, though conscious. Wilson hobbled behind, keeping a lookout. At last, they reached a small, ramshackle cabin nestled in a grove of aspens. Evening light filtered through leaves, painting golden patterns on the weathered walls. Wilson used a hidden key under a loose stone to open the door, and they entered, guns ready. The interior smelled of dust and wood polish, but no sign of recent occupation. A few old blankets were folded on a cot, and a water pump in the corner looked functional. Exhausted, Nathan slumped onto the cot while Belle rummaged for medical supplies. Wilson found a first aid kit in a cupboard, though limited. It included bandages, antiseptics, and a couple of sutures. The men worked together to remove Nathan's shredded bandage. Belle hovered, worry evident in her eyes. With gritted teeth, Nathan endured Wilson's field stitches, each pull of the needle like a hot wire through flesh. Finally, they bandaged the wound securely, injecting him with a dose of antibiotics from the kit. The process left Nathan trembling, sweat-drenched, but stable. Night fell outside, the wind rustling the aspen leaves with a gentle hiss. The trio sat around a single lantern on the cabin's rough plank floor. Wilson rubbed his sore leg. Belle remained silent, her arms folded around her knees, and Nathan breathed slowly, trying to manage the pain. "We'll keep watch," Wilson said quietly. "I doubt they tracked us here, but we can't be sure. My contact texted me that they received the data. They're verifying authenticity. If all goes well, an investigation will be launched. We just need to lay low." Nathan managed a nod. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "For everything." Wilson shrugged. "We've been through worse." "But her," he gestured to Belle. "Whatever they did, she's the proof. She's the living testimony of Capella. You do realize that puts a massive target on her back." Belle raised her head, meeting Wilson's gaze. Her expression acknowledged his point. Nathan swallowed hard. "We'll protect her," he said firmly, ignoring the throbbing in his shoulder. "I owe her everything my life, and apparently a debt from my father's mistakes." Silence fell, filled only by the soft crackle of the lantern. At length, Wilson sighed, reaching into his pocket to retrieve a small pouch of jerky. He offered some to Belle, who sniffed it curiously, then took a small bite. A flicker of appreciation passed over her muzzle. Despite the tension, a semblance of camaraderie formed in that dusty cabin, a glimmer of normalcy amid chaos. Exhaustion claimed them one by one. Wilson volunteered for first watch, propping himself by the window with a rifle. Nathan dozed on the cot, nightmares swirling. He saw Belle as a young girl, trapped in a cold lab, crying soundlessly as masked figures performed horrific experiments. Then the dream shifted to the orchard, where monstrous shapes, half human, half beast, prowled among the apple trees. He jolted awake, heart pounding. Belle sat nearby, blinking at him with concern. He forced a wan smile. "I'm okay," he lied. She exhaled softly, placing a reassuring paw on his hand. Her touch steadied him, anchoring him to the moment. He drifted back to sleep, holding on to that simple comfort. Days stretched into a week. Neither the paramilitaries nor the authorities arrived. Wilson discreetly checked his phone, gleaning tidbits from his contact. The Department of Defense had launched a quiet probe into Paragon Defense Solutions, triggered by the data leak. Dr. Bishop's name was flagged, a person of interest in black site genetic research. Subpoenas were being prepared, but the wheels of bureaucracy turned slowly. Paragon still had resources, lawyers, and corrupt allies. Officially, the Redwood Labs didn't exist, and many politicians likely profited from the arrangement. The danger to Belle remained. During this lull, Belle grew more comfortable around Wilson, though she still refused to speak, or perhaps simply couldn't. She participated in small tasks, gathering water, cleaning the cabin, even helping Wilson secure the perimeter with makeshift alarms. Nathan's shoulder slowly healed, though the pain persisted. He spent hours with Belle, guiding her hand in writing exercises, hoping to reawaken that part of her humanity. Sometimes she managed a shaky letter or two, but frustration often overcame her. One afternoon, while Wilson was away checking a nearby stream, Belle and Nathan sat by the table, scribbling on scraps of paper. Belle paused, drawing a crude wolf-like figure. She tapped it, then pointed to herself. Then she drew a smaller figure with short hair, pointing to Nathan's old photo album. Nathan watched carefully. She drew a broken arrow from the small girl to the wolf, indicating the transformation. Then she drew a small heart shape near the arrow. Glancing at Nathan with questioning eyes, he realized she was asking if he found her monstrous, if the bond they had as children still existed, despite her new form. He placed his hand on hers gently. "You're still you," he murmured. "And I care about you, Belle. That won't change." Her eyes glimmered with gratitude. That silent exchange held a tenderness that transcended their circumstances. That evening, as the sun sank behind the aspens, Wilson returned with a freshly caught fish and a wide grin. "Got something good for dinner," he said. "And news. My contact says we might have an ally in the FBI. They want to meet in 2 days. Off the record. If they can confirm your story, Maybe we can push for official protection or even witness status. Nathan nodded, heart lifting. That's progress. Belle seemed equally relieved, or as relieved as her calm expression allowed. Wilson set about gutting the fish outside, while Belle kindled the fireplace. Nathan helped as best he could, ignoring the dull ache in his shoulder. They fell into a simple domestic rhythm that almost felt normal, as though they were just three friends out on a wilderness retreat. Yet the weight of secrets hung over every moment. After dinner, they sat quietly, listening to the distant hoot of an owl. Nathan thought back on the last few weeks his solitary life shattered, replaced by a cause worth fighting for. The knowledge that Belle had been a child he once knew, transformed by the sins of others, galvanized him in a way he never anticipated. Perhaps redemption lay in standing by her side now, ensuring no one else suffered that fate. She caught him staring, offering a slight tilt of her head, as if to say, "What are you thinking?" He smiled, leaning closer. "Just thankful," he whispered. She blinked, then extended her paw to gently ruffle his hair, an affectionate if somewhat awkward gesture. Nathan chuckled softly, a spark of hope in his chest. In 2 days, they would meet the FBI contact. Another step toward exposing Paragon, freeing others, and maybe, just maybe, finding Belle a place in this world. For now, the night was still, peaceful, a momentary lull before the storm. Unbeknownst to them, Dr. Carlisle Bishop held an emergency meeting with Paragon's board under the cover of darkness. In a sleek city office tower, the group convened to discuss the growing crisis. News of Redwood's infiltration and the Orchard confrontation had reached their ears, as had rumors of an impending federal investigation. Bishop, a tall man with thinning hair and cold, sharp eyes, stood at the head of a polished table. Screens displayed images captured by the Redwood team, grainy shots of Belle's white fur. Nathan's face, Wilson's stance, Bishop's lips curled in contempt. "They've gone to great lengths to expose us," he said, voice low, "but we still have assets. We can crush this investigation if we control the narrative." One board member, a woman in an expensive suit, grimaced. "What about the hybrid, Ethan? Clearly she's still alive. That alone is enough to convict us if it becomes public knowledge." Bishop tapped a button, displaying a live feed from a drone circling the region. "We'll find her. Our private security forces have secured Redwood. They're sweeping the area. Intel suggests the group might be holed up somewhere nearby. We'll locate them." A grizzled man at the far end of the table coughed. "Time is short. The FBI is sniffing around. We need to expedite cleanup, eliminate all threats, even if that means extreme measures." Bishop's eyes flicked to him. "Agreed. I'll ensure we neutralize Ethan, Silvers, and that soldier who helped them. Once that's done, the rest is damage control. We have lobbyists and lawyers to handle the rest." Silence gripped the room. The unspoken truth: they were prepared to commit murder and destruction to preserve their enterprise. Bishop clenched a pen between long fingers, reflecting on the child that Ethan once was, a timid soul with a powerful genome. It infuriated him that this subject, so promising, had slipped through his grasp. He addressed the board in a near whisper, "I'll handle it. We have the means." Then he strode out, leaving the board members in uneasy agreement. The wheels of Paragon's lethal machinery began to turn, forging a path of violence that would soon collide with Nathan, Belle, and Wilson. At the cabin, a soft morning light filtered through the dusty windows. Wilson and Nathan prepared to leave for the FBI meeting, taking only essential gear. The rendezvous location was on a deserted farm road 2 hours away. Belle stood by the doorway, her expression tense. She understood the risks, that they might be walking into a trap or a crossfire. Nathan placed a hand on her shoulder. "We have to try," he said gently. "This is our best chance to legitimize your status as a victim, to get protection. Once it's official, Paragon will have to fight a public battle, not just a secret one." Belle nodded, though her posture radiated anxiety. Wilson confirmed the plan. Belle would remain hidden in the cabin until they signaled it was safe. Or if something went wrong, she'd flee into the woods. Nathan's gut twisted at the thought of leaving her behind, but they agreed it was too risky to bring her. The FBI agent might not react well to seeing a werewolf unannounced. They departed at dawn, leaving Belle with extra ammo, food, and instructions on how to bar the doors. The drive was tense, the old truck rattling over back roads. Wilson kept his rifle at the ready, scanning mirrors for any sign of a tail. Nathan's heart pounded, still dealing with pain from his healing wound. Yet the adrenaline and sense of duty propelled him forward. After a couple of hours, they arrived at the appointed spot, an abandoned service station in a rural area, fields stretching in all directions. A single black sedan waited. Nathan pulled up cautiously, engine idling. Wilson stepped out, hand hovering near his sidearm. A tall man in a dark suit emerged. Badge in hand, Agent Rivers, FBI. A slender woman in a similar suit stood behind him, scanning the horizon. Wilson nodded. "You, Rivers." The agent held out his badge. "Yes, and this is Agent Bloom. We're your contact. Show us what you have." Nathan slid out, laptop in hand, face set in determination. As they approached, Rivers eyed him critically. "Wilson vouches for you," he said, "but we need more than your word. The data you leaked is explosive if authentic." Nathan powered up the laptop, displaying some of the Capella files complete with redwood images. The agents' faces hardened as they skimmed the contents. Agent Bloom let out a low whistle. "This is big," she admitted, eyes flicking between Nathan and Wilson. "Where's the hybrid subject?" Nathan hesitated. "We have her hidden. She's traumatized, and I can't risk exposing her until we know we can trust you." Rivers exchanged a glance with Bloom. "Understandable," he said. "But for your claims to stand, we'll need to meet her eventually. The Bureau can protect you both. Put you in a safe location while we build a case. Paragon's not a small fish. This will get ugly." Wilson tensed. "How do we know you won't just take her away? Put her in another lab," Rivers sighed. "We have protocols, procedures. This isn't a black site. We do things by the book." He paused. "Look, I'm not going to lie. The government is going to want to study her, but legally, ethically, with her consent if we can confirm she's a fully sentient individual. But it beats being hunted down by mercenaries, doesn't it?" Nathan mulled it over, torn. Belle had suffered enough. Could the government truly be trusted? Yet, at the same time, the alternative was constant flight, or worse, capture by Paragon. A flicker of hope told him that perhaps, this time, the law might stand on their side. He slowly nodded. "We'll need assurances in writing. An official statement guaranteeing her rights and protection." Agent Bloom extended a small packet of documents. "We can arrange that. Though it'll take time. For now, we need to get you all into protective custody." Paragon has resources everywhere. Before they could respond, gunshots erupted from behind the service station. Sparks ricocheted off the asphalt. A black SUV screeched around the corner. Men in tactical gear leaning out, weapons blazing. Wilson dived behind the sedan, returning fire. Agent Rivers cursed, yanking Bloom down. Nathan scrambled back to the truck, bullets whining past. Paragon had found them. Chaos engulfed the deserted station. Rivers' sedan took multiple rounds, windows shattering. Bloom radioed frantically for backup, but the signal crackled with interference. Another SUV roared in from a side road, flanking them. The men inside hammered the area with rifle fire. Wilson, pinned behind the sedan, shouted for Nathan to circle around. Nathan fired blindly around the tailgate of the truck, forcing the attackers to duck. Agent Rivers popped up, loosing well-placed shots that downed one gunman. The others advanced, determined. Nathan's mind raced. They couldn't hold out forever against superior numbers. Then his thoughts flicked to Bell. Alone at the cabin, was this assault part of a coordinated strike? The staccato of gunfire reached a crescendo, punctuated by the wail of sirens. From a distant highway, 2 patrol cars peeled into view, responding to the sudden mayhem. The Paragon mercenaries hesitated. Agent Bloom shouted, "FBI, drop your weapons!" A tense standoff ensued. For a moment, it seemed the mercenaries might retreat. Then, abruptly, they lobbed a smoke grenade, covering their withdrawal. Tires squealed, engines roared, and both SUVs sped off across the fields, leaving the FBI agents coughing in the swirling cloud. Wilson wiped blood from a graze on his arm. Nathan lowered his weapon, shaking with anger. Rivers swore, "These guys don't mess around. If local cops see them fleeing, they'll vanish off-road in seconds." He turned to Nathan and Wilson, eyes blazing. "Get in the sedan. Now. We're taking you to a secure location. I'll have additional agents search for your friend. She's not safe." Nathan felt a surge of panic. But what choice did they have? He recognized Belle was likely the next target. "We need to go to her. She's alone," he pleaded. Agent Bloom nodded. "We'll get her. We can't let her fall into their hands." With that, they piled into the bullet-riddled sedan, Wilson cramming into the back seat with Nathan. Sirens wailed closer, lights flashing. Rivers peeled away from the station, calling for reinforcement. Nathan could only pray that Belle would hold out until they reached her. Back at the remote cabin, Belle paced restlessly. A sense of dread gnawed at her, an instinctual warning that danger neared. She peered out the window, scanning the quiet trees. Time seemed to crawl. Nathan and Wilson were overdue. Suddenly, she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Hope flared for an instant, maybe they'd returned. But her keen hearing detected something off. The low hum of an unfamiliar engine. She bristled, muzzle wrinkling in a silent snarl. Moving swiftly, she doused the lantern, plunging the cabin into darkness. A black SUV pulled up outside, headlights off. Several silhouettes emerged, armed men in tactical vests. One gestured to the others, pointing at the cabin. Belle cursed inwardly. They had found her. She readied her rifle, a weapon Nathan had left behind, though it felt awkward in her clawed hands. Her heart thudded. But she channeled the training gleaned from her time fighting monstrous creatures, tapping into her heightened senses. She would protect herself, and the precious evidence within. A boot slammed the front door, rattling it on its hinges. Another tried a side window. Belle crouched behind the table, leveling her rifle. The door burst open, a flashlight beam slicing through the dark. A soldier stepped in, scanning the room. Belle fired, the muzzle flash bright in the cabin's gloom. The soldier flew back, collapsing in the doorway. Shouts erupted outside, footsteps pounding. She ducked behind the overturned table as bullets thudded into the wooden walls. Glass shattered. Another soldier hurled a smoke canister through the window, filling the interior with a choking haze. Belle held her breath, eyes stinging. Their strategy was to flush her out or corner her. She had to move. With a burst of motion, she sprang toward the back door, flinging it open. Another gunman waited there, but her reflexes prevailed. She dodged his shot, slashing with her claws. He yelled, staggering back. She followed up with a vicious strike, toppling him. More shouts. More muzzle flashes. She sprinted into the forest, weaving between trees. The gunmen pursued, though they lacked her speed in the dark. Shots zinged past. But she vanished into the undergrowth like a ghost. One soldier hissed into a radio. Target is mobile. White fur. Engage with lethal force. Belle's chest heaved, fear mingling with adrenaline. She paused behind a thick pine, trying to gauge the enemy's numbers. At least 6 men, from what she'd heard, even with her abilities. She was outgunned. Fleeing deeper into the woods might be her only hope. But a surge of defiance burned in her veins. She was done running, done being hunted like an animal. She remembered Nathan's promise not to abandon her. She would not abandon herself either. The men advanced in a sweeping formation, flashlights slicing the darkness. Belle circled around them, using her keen senses. As they passed, she flung herself at the last man in line, knocking him down before he could react. Another turned, but Belle lunged sideways, his bullets sparking off a tree trunk. She raked his arm, forcing him to drop his rifle. Then she darted away again, vanishing into the shadowy foliage. Nightbirds screeched overhead, disturbed by the commotion. The men regrouped, cursing. One barked, "Keep your eyes open. She's toying with us." Another clutched his bleeding arm, rage fueling his every move. Belle circled again, dispatching her savage strikes whenever an isolated soldier straggled. Still, they pressed on, Dot refusing to break. The clang of metal told her they had night vision gear, giving them some advantage. She took a grazing bullet to her thigh, biting back a pained snarl. Blood trickled, but she pushed through it, heart pounding like a drum. Then she heard a new sound, a chopper's whir in the distance, growing louder. Reinforcements. Panic jolted through her. She couldn't handle a full-scale search with aerial support. She had to retreat, gritting her teeth. She sprinted deeper into the forest, adrenaline dulling her wound. Behind her, the men gave chase, guided by the helicopter's spotlight piercing the canopy. A frantic pursuit ensued. Belle zigzagged around fallen logs, leaping small ravines. The spotlight crisscrossed the treetops, a glaring beacon of pursuit. She stumbled, the thigh wound weakening her. Clinging to a tree trunk for support, she gasped for breath, silent tears of frustration burning her eyes. She didn't want to be captured, but how much longer could she run? Suddenly, the helicopter's searchlight wavered, flickered. Shots rang out from somewhere else, a new presence in the forest. Belle's heart soared. Could it be Nathan, Wilson, the FBI? She heard the chopper veer off, as though under fire from the ground. The paramilitaries turned their attention to this new threat. Belle seized the moment to slip farther into the darkness. Steadily, she made her way up a slope, ignoring the throbbing in her leg. Finally, she collapsed behind a boulder, panting. Through the trees, she glimpsed the helicopter retreating, maybe damaged. Sporadic gunfire echoed faintly, then died away. Silence fell, broken only by the rustle of wind. Belle sank against the stone, pressing a hand to her bleeding wound. Her lungs burned, her body trembling from exertion. With the immediate danger gone, her thoughts turned to Nathan. Had he come to rescue her with the FBI? Or was someone else battling the Paragon men? She felt a surge of longing for that quiet cabin where they had shared simple moments. Weariness replaced by sorrow, she curled up to wait, uncertain what dawn would bring. Morning light found Belle still crouched behind the boulder, her eyes heavy-lidded. The forest stood quiet now. She licked the drying blood on her thigh, grimacing at the metallic taste. A distant rumble of engines made her tense, but this time, it sounded like normal vehicles on the logging roads, not paramilitary convoys. Cautiously, she descended the slope, scanning for signs of life. Smoke curled from somewhere near the cabin, and her chest tightened. She found the structure's door splintered, windows shattered. The interior was a mess of bullet holes, furniture overturned. The paramilitaries had ravaged it, but evidently, they found no sign of her after she fled. She mourned the loss of this temporary refuge, another home destroyed. Would she ever truly find safety? A rustling in the underbrush jerked her attention. She bared her fangs, ready to fight. But then Nathan emerged, followed by Wilson and two strangers in suits, Agent Rivers and Agent Bloom. Belle froze, half in disbelief. Nathan's eyes lit up, relief flooding his expression. "There you are," he breathed, rushing toward her. Belle limped forward, heartsick relief mirrored in her gaze. Nathan gently supported her, wincing at the sight of dried blood on her leg. "My God, are you all right?" "We came as soon as we could. The FBI got a lead that they were hitting the cabin." Belle pressed her forehead to his shoulder, trembling. No words were needed. Over his shoulder, she saw Wilson scanning the wrecked cabin, jaw clenched. Rivers and Bloom hung back, observing Belle with cautious empathy. Bloom spoke first, softly. "She's wounded. Let me see." Belle eyed her warily, but allowed the agent to kneel and examine the injury. Bloom pulled out a first aid kit. "It's a graze. Nasty, but not deep," she said. "We need to disinfect it." Nathan nodded, gently guiding Belle to sit on the cabin's half-intact chair. The pain flared as Bloom cleaned the wound, but Belle endured stoically. Rivers crossed his arms, eyebrows raised. "She's more formidable than I expected," he remarked. "The men we found in the woods were, well, let's just say they got a taste of her capabilities." Wilson let out a gruff laugh. "They found out the hard way." Nathan lightly brushed Belle's fur, an apologetic expression on his face. "I'm sorry we couldn't get here sooner," he murmured. She gazed at him with understanding, her eyes reflecting a quiet acceptance. She had long since grown used to survival on her own, but Nathan's presence now felt like an anchor she never knew she needed. When Bloom finished dressing the wound, Agent Rivers took a step closer. "We've got a safe house," he said. "Federal property, undisclosed location. We'll hide you there while we push the investigation forward. We can't guarantee absolute secrecy, but it's better than staying here. Paragon clearly knows this spot." Belle frowned slightly. Scanning Nathan's face, he nodded. "It's our best shot. We can't fight them alone anymore. They're relentless." Her shoulders slumped in reluctant agreement. She stood, testing her bandaged leg, then offered a short nod to Rivers. The agent seemed relieved that she was willing to cooperate. Carefully, they made their way back to the vehicles. Wilson and Nathan helped Belle into an FBI SUV, tinted windows shielding her from prying eyes. As they drove away, Belle leaned against the seat, exhaustion pulling at her. Nathan sat beside her, occasionally resting a comforting hand on her arm. The gravity of this next step weighed on them both, a leap of faith in the hope that the government would treat Belle justly, that the Capella conspirators would finally face justice. A silent vow passed between them. They would stand together, no matter what came next.